It's more complicated, but do you see a way that it ends acceptably? I mean, you have a well-armed rural white population that is now correctly understanding that it is being targeted by a mob that claims it's guilty of all sorts of things that it actually isn't guilty of yet, and threatening to redistribute the opportunity that it has. It's a catastrophe unfolding in slow motion.
It's the motherfucking Eagle Double G. Snoop Dogg. You know I'm mobbing with the D.R.E.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean I'm uncomfortable with. I'm concerned that we are about to uninvent America and that the horror that will replace it is something that ought to frighten us all. But I agree with you completely about what you said about school. What I should have said is we know how to make better schools. We don't know how to make good schools, and it's very important that we figure it out, and it should look radically different. But
can I say something, Bret? Just quickly. I'm struck by the contrast. So there are two big areas of public service provision which have massive impacts on Black communities: it's policing and education, both of which are unionized, both of which are provided by public employees and so forth and so on, and both of which it could be argued have failed the community. Look at the discourse within the community about the failure of public institutions to measure up to the needs of the people. With respect to police, we've got defund the police. We've got throwing bricks at cops. We've got what we've got. We've got Black Lives Matter. With respect to education, you have the left of center politics implacably opposed to doing what Camille Foster just said needed to be done. To fighting to the last man to keep it from happening. Now, my point is not about them. I expect them to defend their interests. My point is about us. Where's the criticism of that for people who think that Black lives matter?
Can you say what exactly the criticism, what is that in that sentence?
That is the failure of conventional public educational services being provided to Black people to convey to them the opportunity in this life to which they are entitled.
So this is why...
Which can be remedied, Camille suggests, by expanding educational choice, which policy is implacably opposed by the Democratic Party.
So I believe the problem is both parties, that the parties have effectively got a stranglehold on power, right? And that stranglehold on power means that policy does not serve the public, and it hasn't for decades. So this is why I started where I did. I believe if you are to get anywhere, if Camille is right about what the solution actually looks like, then what you need is a governmental structure that actually gives a damn what the consequences of its behavior are, rather than parties that are cynically pointing us at each other so that we don't notice the corruption that they're involved in. That, I really think, is ultimately the only route out of this, because if we let the parties continue to play their role, they're going to start a race war. I mean, very predictably.
That may be true, but you don't mean to be saying that the Democrats and the Republicans stand in the same place vis-a-vis school choice.
No.
Because that's not true.
No, I think the Democrats are basically cynically toying with partnering with this so-called anti-racist movement, and that is going to back whites against the wall and cause them to start seeing things racially in a way that they haven't in more than a generation, and that the net result of those two phenomena is that we are going to be headed to a conflict that nobody knows the way out of. And what's more, unlike our first Civil War, there's not even a geographic description of a solution. Right?
I'm not sure about that, though, because you have quite a lot of whites that are no longer interested or exhausted in their own identity who are not going to be taking up that war. So it gets a lot more complicated than white versus Black.
I agree it's more complicated, but do you see a way that it ends acceptably? I mean, you have a well-armed rural white population that is now correctly understanding that it is being targeted by a mob that claims it's guilty of all sorts of things that it actually isn't guilty of yet, and threatening to redistribute the opportunity that it has. It's a catastrophe unfolding in slow motion.
Although the segment of the population that is so well armed, generally speaking, is probably not the same segment of the population that is enjoying all manner of privileges and opportunity.
That's exactly what I'm
That's his point,
saying. The people who are the rent seekers, who I believe are the self-defined villains here, the rent seekers would rather that we fight each other. They would rather that people of average means, both white and black and every other description, that we fight each other and that we not notice where the opportunity actually went. That's the game.
And